Welcome back to the ITN World News, which is seen by viewers around the globe via satellite television. Riot police have clashed with farmers from several European countries demonstrating outside the European Parliament in Strasbourg. The farmers are angry about the recent deal on agricultural subsidies between the European Community and the United States that's designed to clear the way for the GATT talks to achieve a world trade agreement. They say it'll ruin their livelihoods.
Farmers from across Europe united today in bitter opposition to the GATT deal negotiated by Ray McSharry. His effigy was burnt in disgust in the centre of Strasbourg, where thousands had come to protest. A largely peaceful demonstration was marred by some violence. A petrol bomb thrown at the police exploded in the street. They responded with tear gas, sending the demonstrators fleeing to escape the fumes. No longer just the French, but farmers from Spain, Italy, Belgium and elsewhere, all demanding their governments veto the GATT deal. Some 50,000 packed a stadium in the city, letting off firecrackers as speaker after speaker warned of the dire consequences for European farmers. This stadium is now filled to overflowing, and the farmers are still arriving from all over Europe. But despite their numbers here today, it's still doubtful whether they really have the political muscle to sabotage a GATT deal. Among the crowds, a few British farmers dismissing talk of any hostility with the French.
I think it's a question of solidarity. We're very disappointed by the French suggestions of those attacks, which was really done by a completely unrepresentative and very fringe organisation. It's not the people here today.
But as they left, the fringe groups were at work again, lobbing missiles at the riot police. In the clashes, a number of people were injured, one seriously. It was not the image the organisers wanted to portray, but some farmers increasingly see this as a battle for survival, in which any means are justified. Libby Wiener, ITN, Strasbourg.
The United Nations airlift to the Bosnian capital Sarajevo has again been suspended, this time after an American relief aircraft was hit by small arms fire. The plane was not badly damaged and there were no injuries. Parts of the city came under heavy shelling again, and the Bosnian army accused Serbian gunners of deliberately targeting the airport runway to disrupt aid deliveries. Meanwhile, thousands of refugees are now resigned to spending winter in uncomfortable and dangerous conditions. In the town of Travnik alone, there are 14,000 refugees, and they have little protection against either Serbian shells or the cold weather.
Wooden planks now cover many of the shattered windows of Travnik. No defence at all against more Serb shells or the worsening winter weather. At least 500 refugees have taken sanctuary in a former sports hall, enduring deprivations unseen in Europe since the darkest days of the Second World War. Families try to remake their homes despite the damp, unsanitary conditions. Children play, while the elderly appear to have retreated to their own inner worlds, passively awaiting whatever fate dictates. On top of his world being one of the public shelters in Zenica. Almost 18,000 refugees have been accommodated in private homes here, but 8,000 more are in shelters like this, many carrying the injuries of the merciless civil war. Public health officials are concerned about the spread of infectious diseases. Sanitation is minimal. Local authorities are concerned about the lack of fuel for garbage collection. The reluctant refugees who have no electricity are concerned with survival. Many have been here for the past 4 months and are preparing as best they can for winter.
Peru has granted political asylum to 93 members of the Venezuelan armed forces who flew there after taking part in last Friday's bloody but abortive coup against President Carlos Andrés Pérez. A Venezuelan Air Force general led the men when they seized a plane to fly into exile. But 50 of the lower ranks say they want to go home because they'd only been obeying orders. The imprisoned Burmese opposition leader Aung San Suu Kyi says she's refusing to accept any funds or favours from her captors, thus effectively beginning a hunger strike. She's been under house arrest in Rangoon for nearly 4 years after founding the National League for Democracy. Her British husband, Michael Aris, says she'll soon run out of the means of sustaining life.
This is the first the outside world has seen of Aung San Suu Kyi in 3.5 years. These pictures of the Nobel Peace Prize winner with her sons Alexander and Kim were taken during a family visit in May. the first of 2 such humanitarian visits permitted by the Burmese authorities. This month, the family had been planning to travel again to her home here in Rangoon, where Suu Kyi's held under house arrest. But now, in a handwritten note allowed past her guards, she's asked her family not to come, her continued detention having forced her to take desperate measures. Suu Kyi's husband, Oxford academic Dr. Michael Ayres, rarely makes public statements for fear of the effect it could have on his wife's detention. Today, though, he broke his silence.
I have reason to believe that the circumstances under which she is held now pose a grave threat to her life. The meager personal funds she has used to maintain herself while her solitary detention continues are now almost exhausted. She refuses to accept any funds or favors from her captors, believing this would only serve to prolong her illegal detention. For the same reason, she would accept no material support from me.
Dr. Ayres was speaking at St. Hugh's College in Oxford. 28 years ago, Suu Kyi was a student here when the couple met and later married.
Knowing my wife as I do, it is very serious. She is extremely resolute in a decision of this sort, and she has had ample time to think it out.
So if she's withdrawing or refusing to accept any of the funds or indeed food, she's effectively on hunger strike?
Well, it will begin to look like that. When things will really become critical, I can't say, because I have no means of knowing.
How long do you think she will survive on that sort of thing?
I simply do not know.
Shortly before her arrest, Aung San Suu Kyi was the popular leader of Burma's growing democracy movement. The party she founded, the NLD, won more than 80% of the seats in elections, but the result was annulled. The military government insists it's committed to an eventual handover of power, but shows no signs of releasing Suu Kyi, though the Burmese foreign minister told us in August she was free to leave the country on humanitarian grounds, provided she didn't come back.
The Ministry of Foreign Affairs had issued that if she would like to leave, she can.
They have agreed to release her if she chooses exile. She will not make that choice. She is committed to this struggle. They know that very well, too.
With today's announcement, Suu Kyi is clearly attempting to force the government to agree to a dialogue, whatever the personal cost.
My hope, of course, is that reasonable talks begin very, very soon, and that this will lead to her own situation being resolved, and from that, other things too.
And if they don't, what's the scenario that faces you?
It's a scenario I prefer not to think about.
And that's the ITN World News. From me and all the team here in London, goodbye.
Richard Lindley with the World News. Now the main stories this morning. Police managed to foil another IRA bomb attack in London last night. The device, large enough to have caused massive damage, was found in a van in Tottenham Court Road. It's the third time in a fortnight bombs have failed to go off.
This time there was a warning. 2 coded phone calls to the police gave 30 minutes notice of up to 4 bombs planted in an area of central London near Oxford Street. The security forces moved quickly to seal off and search the area. Hotel guests were moved out. And one blue transit van packed with up to £1,000 of homemade explosives was found parked in a side street. Parked right outside this man's shop. How far then was the van from your shop, where you were?
Right in front, on the doorstep.
What, 10 yards away?
10 yards away.
Yeah, it sounds like you've had an incredibly lucky escape.
Incredible is the word, yes, I think.
Bomb disposal experts spent a considerable time working on the van and just before midnight carried out several controlled explosions on the vehicle. Police are still examining the device, but at first signs it would appear this was an incredibly lucky escape. It would seem that the bomb, fully primed, failed to go off. Had it done so, there would have been huge loss of life.
Is that it is, again, in one of London's main streets at a crowded time of the evening, and obviously the potential was enormous in terms of injury and death to the public.
Detectives are now anxious to trace the van's movements over the past few weeks in an effort to trace those responsible. Police say in the run-up to Christmas, the threat of further attacks remains high. Robin White, ITN, Central London.
And the van police want to trace is a blue Ford Transit, registration B706DVX. Anyone who has seen it in the last 3 weeks should ring the anti-terrorist hotline on 0800 789 321. A murder hunt is underway in South Africa after 2 British women holidaymakers were found dead on a remote beach in northern Natal. It's believed the bodies of Julia Godwin and Elizabeth Over had been dumped in the sea. Both women were in their 30s. Mrs. Godwin's husband and baby daughter had been expected to join them on the trip. Finally, millions of people are expected to appeal against property valuations for the new council tax because house prices have fallen since the assessments were made. Councils yesterday published the valuations which grade homes into 8 bands. Exactly how much households will have to pay won't be known until next year. And that's the news this morning. Goodbye.